G'day everyone and welcome back to episode 20 of Burgers Podcast 25. It is that time of the year again where every 10 episodes we bring on a special guest. But first of all, I would like to say I'm always joined by my co-host
Louis from the Perth Blue Baggers pod.
Today we are privileged to have PommyinOZ. How are you, mate?
I'm good. I'm privileged to be here. I'm excited about this one. I can't wait.
We couldn't wait to have you all day. I was running through my mind 24/7, so time has finally arrived and can't wait to fire away some questions at you. But first of all, we'll quickly jump into a little preview of the Richmond game coming up for round one. So, Pommy, we want to quick fire a little question at you about round one. How excited are you for round one and how do you feel about facing Richmond again to start the season?
I'm super excited. It's a weird one, isn't it? Because it feels like for 8 of the 10 years we've been the underdogs. Richmond have won 3 premierships. It always is that game. Usually we go into it and think, we wish we were Richmond. I hope we can show something against the reigning premiers. But the last couple of years, it's shifted, hasn't it? And Carlton are the favourites. We're the dominant force. We haven't won the flag yet, but we're the better side. So I always am a little bit dubious about this game just because when we were rubbish, we used to show something for 3 quarters and then Richmond ran over the top. And they'll be like us 5 years ago. They'll want to hurt us. They'll want to make us feel a little bit human again. So I can't wait to see this and see that development in the boys from being the babies and hoping they can beat the big brother to now we are the big brother, we are the masters, and showing Richmond we're the best team in Melbourne.
100%, Bobby. Nailed it on the collar, mate. What do you think, Louis?
Yeah, look, they'll fight to start the season off well, and I'm always excited for when the season begins. Yeah, it's good to be in that sort of position where we're the ones that are looking to prove ourselves this season, and they're the underdogs.
100%, mate. 100%. I remember going to the game that we did break the drought against the losing streak against Richmond, and I think you've seen it. I think it might have been just these little snippet videos, edits of just us beating Richmond, and gets the fans up and about, gets the Carlton community up and about, and I think that's the main thing at the moment is when the Carlton community are up and about, the Carlton Football Club is up and about. So I can't wait for round one. I can't wait for the home and away season to finally arrive. Waited a long few months. Lots of devastating news throughout the pre-season. Lots of good news throughout the pre-season as well. But, I think this last week or so, it's been where we've had probably the best positive POV in the Carlton community. I think if we can take that into round one and get that dub by at least a good margin, not like a blowout, but a convincing margin, like a convincing football game margin. And I think that'll be the big thing for us coming up this week. That's all from me, but let's get into our next question. So, Tommy, what do you think Carlton needs to do differently this time compared to previous round one clashes?
Well, I don't mean to disrespect Richmond because I respect all 17 clubs, but this is a game that the Blues have got to look at here, thinking they are playing a very young, inexperienced Richmond with a glittering of experience. So I want to see a bit of what I saw against GWS, Carlton really focus on doing the basics well, because I always look at these games and I always look back to West Coast Eagles a couple of years ago, where we all got a little bit excited, but we kind of beat up on West Coast, but we didn't learn anything. It was kind of like showboat football. And it kind of backfired a couple of weeks later when he came up against top teams, and ultimately Collingwood killed us at the death. So I'm hoping Carlton use this game of going, no matter what happens, no matter what Richmond do, we play this system that we want to play in the finals. So if that's building from the back, good ball use like we saw against GWS, even if the corridor opens and it becomes too easy, just keep doing what we do and beat up on them the right way. Don't try and go showboat football. So, because the week after, it gets a little bit harder against Hawthorn, doesn't it? And then the doggies follow. So try and get as much minutes into the legs, experience as we need. That hopefully pays us back round 24 and in the finals.
Yeah. Hopefully it's a convincing finals debut, not like a last year one where we were fighting right at the death to basically save. Well, yeah, it was to save our season. So don't want that happening this year. We want a convincing finals berth. And this is where I'll go over to Louis to get his perspective on that question.
Yeah, so we want to build the system that we're going to be using throughout the season, because you want to have the belief that it will work for the against the harder teams. So really, maybe you treat it like some of the practice matches where you're building in whatever system that they've been working on during the pre-season, which is the speed and power, it seems to be. Maybe what would you define that as, Pom? The speed and power.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because can players get faster? I don't believe they can. I do think what Voss was, from my interpretation, was trying to move that ball quicker, because the old saying, the ball travels faster than a man. And we did notice that against GWS, especially, that Carlton were looking for that short kick, then that handball, get the handball chains going. And before you knew it, we looked really good. It was quite impressive. From the St Kilda game to the GWS game, it's like two different teams. It's hard to believe they're both Carlton, even though the players were the same. So I think that's what Voss is looking for. I think power, we're always going to be powerful. You've got Cripps, Hewitt, big boys who can do the hard work. I think the next stage is adding that nice glossy ball movement. So I agree with you. I don't want us to treat it too easy, but I hope they stick for 4 quarters with that mantra of, we're going to play this way and not worry about the score. But if it's a 100-point win, it's a 100-point win. But I'd take a 20-point win doing the right things over the West Coast game. I always look back at that, and at half time, we kind of just kept kicking it to Harry, knowing that Eagles couldn't do it, and we didn't learn anything. I'd rather as this 4 quarters go, we're going to do this, master it for next week against Hawthorn, no matter what happens.
Yeah.
Sorry, my light just randomly came on. Anyway, we'll get into the next question, where we've got Richmond is in a bit of a transition phase. How dangerous do you think they still are?
Always dangerous. I think you look at 2018 Carlton, where we won twice. Oh yeah, we matched it with them. And then I look at 2019, they lost Grimes and then Rans with an ACL very early, and Carlton were really physical and tried to make it hard. So I'd never underestimate any side, particularly Richmond, because, to use the Richmond phrase, this used to be Carlton's grand final. This is a huge game for Richmond. They're not going to be playing finals. So this is the kind of game that, when you're a bottom 4 building side, you want to win. You want to have that kind of good vibe. So Richmond ain't going to make it easy, and they've got more than enough people in that team to make it ugly, slow Carlton down, make it hard. So I think it'll be tough. I'm just hoping we can get the jump on them and say, look, there's no point trying, we're too good. So you don't want to keep them in it for long. We used to see that with Carlton, didn't we? If they keep us in by about half-time, the crowd get excited, they start believing, and the last thing we want is 40,000 Richmond fans believing they can maybe shock the world.
Yeah.
100%. Really well said, Pommy. Over to you, Luke.
Yeah. We're going into the next question. Maybe we'll get into the more of the season preview now. Covered Richmond pretty extensively. Which Carlton player do you think will have the biggest impact? Oh, no, how that's about this game. Oh, we can still ask that question. Which Carlton player do you think will have the biggest impact in this game?
I'll be looking at Tom de Koning in this game. I think GWS, he showed a little bit. We saw, he was against a key defender, so it was a real nice warm-up, I thought, for Tom, that he played someone that he should be, and I thought he beat him very well. I'm looking at this season for Tom. There's going to be all that money coming at him. So this is the year where, for Tom, he really puts himself in the shop window and can go to Carlton and say, I am worth 1.2 million. I am 1.3 million. So by token, his 8th season, I'm expecting Tom to be really, really good. And this is the best game, isn't it? It's against Nankervis, a big guy, a very experienced guy. This is where Tom can make a statement and say, I'm a modern day ruckman, I'm too good. So I'm really looking at Tom this game and throughout the year to really break the game open, and I think he can. But this game, I think, is a huge game for Tom. No Charlie, presumably, so he's going to slide a little bit forward as well. I think Tom might have a huge game and get 3 Brownlow votes, my only call. I think he might get the 3 Brownlow votes in the Richmond game.
Hopefully. Yeah. 100%. Didn't quite get that during last season when he deserved it. Cripper took the votes from him.
Yeah. It's tough playing with Cripps, though. Cripps steals votes off everyone.
Yeah.
All right. Is that me now, Louis?
Yeah, go into the season preview sort of questions.
All right. Pommy, who do you see as Carlton's breakout player in 2025?
Tough one because there's so many there, but I do think this is a huge opportunity with Jagger Smith's injury. I think Voss nailed it well. Someone's misfortune is someone's fortune. I think that fortune is Cooper Lord. I think Cooper Lord suddenly now the doors are opened as the extra midfielder. And I've got a feeling that Cooper Lord's going to surprise people. At the start of the year, I thought he would break into the team. I think now it's a little bit easier. I think Cooper's going to really showcase what he did at Sandringham Dragons. And he was probably the guy that made everyone better around him in his draft year and he got forgotten about. I think he comes into a Blues side that's very well established. And I think you're going to see the best Cooper Lord. So I think he's going to have a real big year this year.
Yeah, I would echo that statement as well.
Yeah, we have actually
Lord is in for a big one.
100%. We have actually got a fan question about Cooper Lord that we'll dive into a little bit later on in the podcast. But, Louis, what are your thoughts on Carlton's breakout player in 2025?
Yeah, obviously we've got quite a few different names you could pull out of the hat. You've got Jackson Binns. People consider likening him to Paddy Dow lately. I don't think that's fair. He hasn't had enough game time yet to prove or not prove himself. And then you got Lockie Cowan, who you could argue the breakout year last year as well, but he could really try and cement his spot. And so could TDK have that big year where he could get into like a sort of all-Australian selection thinking.
Yeah, 100%. You've nailed it there, Lou. I'll get into this next question. This one I answered actually on fan cams in Terry's newest fan cam. So shout out to Tez having me on. Who will take out Carlton's best and fairest this season?
That's tough. You know what? I was bold. I was on a podcast earlier this year and I said that there's going to be an event where Carlton eventually transition from Patrick Cripps' midfield to Sam Walsh starts to be the dominant force and Cripps starts to be more the leader and the provider. I've got a feeling that Sam Walsh takes out the BNF. I think Sam Walsh is going to be our best player this year and we're going to see the best Sam Walsh. So I'm going to back Sam Walsh in to take out the John Nichols because he's got a bit of catching up to do to try and catch Cripps' record. So I think he might as well start now and start chipping away at Cripps' record.
There you go.
100%. What do you think, Lou?
Yeah, it'd be Sam Walsh's would be in the mix. Also got Harry Mackay, could be kicking quite a few goals this year, so he could get up there. But I think I'll go with the safe option of Cripper. We'll just have another solid season.
As he always does, Mr. Consistent, I reckon. But for me, I did have Sam Walsh. As Pommy just said, I think it turns into Sam Walsh's midfield, and yeah, as you said, Cripps is the provider. He's the telling people what to do, and then it's basically Sam Walsh from there, and what he does with all the other midfielders. But Cripps gives directions to Walsh. Walsh does what he does best, really. But we'll get into our next question. What should Carlton's realistic aspirations be in 2025?
Controversial, but I think at this stage of the rebuild, Carlton should be looking at grand final or bust now. I think our mentality should be that. I heard Sam Mitchell say something the other day which fascinated me just in the messaging, where he said that we're not scared of talking about flags. Like, it's not something that they're scared of. And he backed it up by saying that they're trying to build towards that, so they've got to get used to talking about it, so it doesn't become a shock when you're suddenly involved in that conversation. And I think Carlton, they've played finals 2 years in a row. This is presumably their third year in a row. They've got the experience. They've been there. They've seen it from the highs of 2 years ago, where they were a game away from the granny, to last year sneaking in and then getting a bit of a lesson from the reigning premiers who went on to win the flag. So I think now the Blues have been there on every scenario you can be, apart from getting to the grand final. So for me, I think grand final, I really do think the Blues should be thinking benchmark. We're either Brisbane next year or Sydney. We're one of the two. But we're going to be at the big dance. That's where we're going to go. So for me, that's where I think our pass score needs to be mentally. And ultimately, you've got to do 24 weeks of work to get the right to be in the 8. So get the 8 out of the way, but the big focus should be we're going to get to the final.
Yeah.
Yep. This year needs to be the year. Can't keep, chipping away in finals and then getting knocked out. It's got to be consistent. Got to be consistent this whole year. I think that'll be the big word brought up a lot, is consistency. We saw a lot of it probably in that GWS game when we didn't drop our heads, and I said this in fan camps as well. We didn't drop our heads. We kept chipping away. GWS would kick a couple goals. We'd kick a couple goals again, and then we'd do it again. We'd do it again. Then we just keep extending that lead. And it was the providence, I don't know if that's a word, but from Cripps, Chera, even that little bit of work from Camporelli out on the wing, just keep on providing. And, our small forwards did an absolute excellent job. Brody Kemp was frigging throwing his body all over the place, marking everything left, right and centre. Throwing his body at the ball, and it's a bloody pre-season match. Like, if that's not a good sign, I don't know what is, really.
Yeah.
That's really all I've got to say about that one. But this will be probably coming into this question with our next question is, how do we need to improve for this season to be a contender?
For me, it's quite simple. I think it's the St Kilda game is probably the best game I've ever seen to show someone who doesn't quite understand how annoying it is to be a Carlton fan. Because then you watch the GWS game and everything you saw bad in the St Kilda game didn't exist in the GWS game. And that, you said it yourself, consistency, that is Carlton through and through. For every Geelong performance last year, we can do a Sydney performance. We can just literally implode and look like the worst side in the league. And you start questioning, was last week luck or what's going on? So for me, I think it's having that consistency, hitting that 15-metre kick under no pressure, being able to retain possession without relying on Sam Docherty taking a one-handed screamer or Harry Mackay beating 4 players to the ball. I think it's having that ability to really execute the basics. And I think us and GWS are like almost the same team. Our best is as good as anyone in the league, but when we're bad, we could easily be a top 4 side as well. I mean, a bottom 4 side. So I'm really looking this year to improve just them easy kicks. You saw Lucas Camporelli be the master of it this week. Make himself free, make himself loose. I think he had 8 marks, 7 of which were uncontested. He did the hard stuff of running into space and opening himself up and giving Ollie Hollands an easy kick. giving Doherty an easy kick. Make it easy on each other. Don't make yourself play to your best ability. Play to the simple stuff. So really, we can master the hard stuff, can't we, Carlton? We can do the hard bits. It's the easy stuff that sometimes we make look really hard. So that's what I'm hoping for this year. Execute the basics, and the superstars will take care of themselves. Harry will take a mark on 8 players. Kerno will kick a goal from 65. Cripps will burst out of a stoppage with 4 people hanging on to him. If you do the basics, then excellent things we do are a benefit to us as opposed to needed.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Really well said. What do you think, Lou?
Yeah, well, I have to bring up the word injuries. Stay healthy, but sometimes it's not always in our control, as you know. So clearly you want team cohesion, but we also want to give the kids a go. So, yeah, so it's about having team cohesion, make sure everyone knows their role, identifies their role, plays their role, and yeah, we're very efficient throughout the season. And hope if you want to have your best chance of the flag, finish top 4, 15, 16, or 17 wins. Probably more likely we'll get 15 or 16 wins. Yeah, so that's what we'll look to try and showcase.
What do you boys think, Louis and Henry, about, you just said about injuries? Would you like to see Voss as well have a bit of faith? So like round 1, if Kerno's 75%, which we know he usually plays, would you like Voss to like back Kemp in round 1 and say, you know what, we'll leave Kerno, give him another week training. Kemp, Harry, you should be enough to beat beat Richmond. And really trying to protect the players for round 24 as opposed to trying to bank quick wins.
Yeah, Geelong seem to do that a bit. They rest their players in probably sort of low-key matches. So, yeah, we can certainly rest players and take them off in the 4th quarter once the damage has been done. And all the players know their role and they'll still do it. So Kemp has had plenty of time this preseason to look into his forward craft. So hopefully he's got all the abilities to, step up if Kerno or Mackay is rested or injured.
Yeah, you see, I reckon this is actually something that the footy club have lacked over the years, is rushing players straight back in. I do want to probably take the precautionary approach with, say, your Cripps, your Wiedering, your Mackays, Kernos, against them low, unexperienced kind of teams. Like, you've got your North Melbourne who are rising, your West Coast, probably, obviously Richmond. Take that precautionary approach. If Kerno needs a week of training, give it to him, and back in the younger player. See what he's made of. Give him a test, and if he fails that test, then he's always got next week, and you can bring in a key forward that's more experienced, and then he'll get through that little training block during the week. You never know, he could come back and bloody bag 10 the next week. So, really, I think we do back in Brodie Kemp. We even just saw it in that game. He was never out of the game the whole entire game. So, all about consistency, as I have probably said more times than I ever have in my whole entire life. So, I reckon I've said that so many times today. But anyway, we'll get into our next question, where, if all goes well, where do you see Cooper Lord playing?
Is that a fan question?
That is.
Yeah. Okay, we're in fan questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think opening stages of the season, I think you'll see him do what he did the last couple of weeks, where he's going to be like the 5th rotation in the midfield, give the boys a bit of a relief, which allows Chera, Walsh to play elsewhere when he comes in and get his teeth dirty with Cripper and Hewitt. But I always have this long-term vision. Now, this is not me bagging George Hewitt. I'm a huge George Hewitt fan. I call him Rodri because I think he's the most underrated player of Carlton's midfield. I think people forget how important he is. But I think by the end of the season, you're going to see, in preparation for next year with Jagger, I think you might see Cooper Lord take Hewitt's spot, and you see Cripper go to more the defensive side, and Cooper Lord starts being that more dominant provider, like Tom Liberatore is. Smaller player who's just very physical, gets in and under, and has got a turn of pace. So I said it last year, I think Cooper Lord will replace Hewitt, and I think he's going to get a year now to learn off Hewitt, and Hewitt becomes the fifth best midfielder at the club, and Cooper Lord takes that position. So this time next year, we'll be doing this show together, and our midfield will be Walsh, Cooper Lord, Jagger Smith, Patrick Cripps, and then Walsh and Chera are the glistens on the top. And I think that's the dream midfield. I think that's the Brisbane midfield. I think that's the Port Adelaide with Rosie, Jason Horne-Francis, and Zach Butters. It's exciting. I think that's the next evolution of Carlton, that we go from this rambustious physical brand of football to the speed and power that Voss does. And if I think speed and power, I think Connor Rosie, Zach Butters, and Jason Horne-Francis, they're classy, but they're also tough and hard. And I think if anyone wants to see speed and power, go and watch St Kilda versus Port. Jason Horne-Francis, he's hard, he's tough, he's also exciting. And I think that midfield I've named is fast, exciting, and tough.
Yeah.
Let's give your thoughts, Louis.
Yeah, Cooper Lord got a bit of muscle on him this preseason. Came back, what was it, when we first, there was some picture released from media back in November or maybe even late October or something like that. And he had some big biceps and all. So maybe, yeah, it kind of looks like he's trying to get the strength of Hewitt there. So, yeah, maybe a sort of like-for-like replacement come the future.
Yeah, very well said. All right, next question. And I remember answering this question in the Father's Day pod, and I did not know what stealing meant. And now I do. Oh, hang on. You'll understand. Is Carlton stealing the best in the comp? I didn't really understand the stealing perspective, but now I do. So, anyways, let's get on to your thoughts on, is Carlton stealing the best in the comp?
It's a tough one because, I mean, you can, sometimes when you're a Carlton fan, you can keep your blue glasses on and probably say Carlton are the best team. Genuinely, I think we're one of 6 teams that can genuinely win it. And I think that you look at Carlton's age, we're, 6th oldest in the list. You knock Newman off that list, probably makes us about 8th if you take some of our older players. I think the 6 teams, and of them 6 teams, I'd say 3 teams are probably going to be a dominant force for the next 5 years along with us. So I don't think we've got the highest ceiling. I would say we've probably got the highest untapped potential out of all of them. I think if I look at all them teams, I think they can say their babies have already started to excel, where we're still talking about some of the players that there's still another level to go consistently. And I think that's what hides us, to use your word, Henry, consistent. I think from a consistent perspective, our ceiling is very high. It's lacking from where it should be. We should see TDK do the second half of Brisbane 9 games out of 10, as opposed to 2 games out of 10. So I don't think we're the greatest team in the league by talent. I think there's other teams around us, but I do think that we're up there with all the other teams you can name. If we play our best, I think we shouldn't fear anyone in the league. Brisbane, Sydney, Collingwood, Geelong. I think our boys on their day can do it, as been proven in the last 2 years. It's doing it every week, not just round 0 versus Brisbane. It's doing it. I'm sure Brisbane would agree with me. They would rather lose round 0 and beat us in a final. And I'm sure we'd all agree. We'd rather get battered round 0 than beat them in the final. So it's about being able to do it every week.
Yeah.
Yeah. The word to describe it, I'd say, is delusion. Are we really? Do we really think we're the best in the league? The one time I think we actually showed consistent ceiling football was against Geelong last year, the second game, the Carlton Respects game. So we do have it. It's just we need the team cohesion and players to showcase their role and whatever. and they need to build that sort of consistent brand, which is our ceiling.
I never want to break anyone's heart, but round 18 we were second, and then we slid. But like for the whole year we were second, and someone said to me a while ago, a good mate of mine said, as good as we were only the second best team in the country via the ladder. Sydney were still better than us. And I think that just shows you the levels you've got to go to. As good as we were against Geelong and teams like that, we were still second behind Sydney. So that's the level. And then you've got to remember Brisbane, they came from nowhere. So Brisbane are better than Sydney. We're just below Sydney. Shows how hard it is to be that good. It's impossible to do it from round 1 to round 24. But Brisbane, all in all, were probably better than Carlton and Sydney throughout the year because they ended up winning it.
Indeed.
All right, I'm here. I've got another question. To what degree are Carlton's injuries in the club's control? That's a very, very good question, by the way.
I think players like Chera, we can blame the club because it feels like when you've had, 3-4 hamstrings in 6 months, that screams workload, that screams mismanagement, doesn't it? But then when I look at players like Marchbank, who's left the club, and players like Jack Martin, I think Jack Martin's an interesting one because I think Geelong are going to show us how you look after Jack Martin. You play him for 2 weeks and then you rest him for 4 weeks and you just prep him for finals. I don't think we were ever good enough to be like that. I think Jack Martin had to play because we didn't have anyone else. But when I look at Marchbank strikes me as the kind of guy that could get in an elevator and do an ACL. Like, that guy's injured every part of his body. It's like the sniper game my son plays on PlayStation 5. It's like the injuries are just ridiculous when you look at it. It's like he's done his back, he's done his clavicle, he's done everything. So I think it's easy to blame the club, but I always ask this: you don't know what these players do in the off season, and being friends with some of the playing group, some of the things they do, checking the ingredients on food, the ingredients on what they're drinking. Does everyone do that at the club? You just don't know. So I think you've got to blame the club, but I do think when we have an injury list like we have done over the last 10 years, some of them names are repeat offenders. Like, I know people like to blame Russell, but you're telling me Russell's to blame for Marchbank. Marchbank's been injured before Russell. He's probably still injured now and he's not playing. Like, don't mean to be nasty to him, but some people's bodies just don't work for high-level sport, where some players just seem to be immune. Look at Cripper. Cripper plays the stupidest, most dangerous way you could possibly play, and the worst that happens is he has another bandage the next week. Where, like, if you view Marchbank like that, he'd probably come out on a body bag, wouldn't he? Like, the way Marchbank was, bless him. Like, if he went on the ball, he might retire the next day. So it's hard to say. I think the club's got to hold some account, though. Like, when I ask you guys the question, I felt last year our injuries were our fault because it felt like we were always looking for the sugar hit. Chera would miss for 2 weeks, and as soon as Chera was fit enough to kick a ball, he's back on the ball. Where my argument was, you're telling me you couldn't give him Cooper Lord 4 weeks and just said to Chera, look, we'll test you 15 minutes in the VFL this week. Just see how you feel. Like, we'll bank the wins when we need them. I do think it backfired in the end because in the end we lost, TDK most of the year, Walsh, Chera. Like, it adds up when you risk it. So I do think we look for sugar hits too quickly. We were desperate to win the next week. I think long term, like you said earlier, which was spot on, Geelong don't do that. Geelong won't bring Dangerfield in round 16 versus North. They'll leave him round 17 versus Hawthorn. They'll give him an extra week. I think that's what we need to do as well. So I think it's 50-50 to answer the question. I've danced around it. I don't think it's as easy as it was Russell's fault. I think it's a collection of player, medical staff, and also the pressure maybe Voss puts on to play him next week.
Yep.
What are your thoughts, Lou?
Yeah, it's just a accumulation of different things: bad luck, mismanagement, and just maybe there's always a chance that the players aren't doing enough themselves on their own. to keep healthy, but I think it's mostly just bad luck. And we've seen that it's not just our team all the time. Western Bulldogs have been hit very hard this preseason by injuries, where they've had it for the past 5 years or whatever, the same problems we have, I don't know. But, as West Coast has also had some injuries problems. Even Collingwood, I think, have had problems with players like DeGoey most of the time. There's just susceptible players that keep getting injured. And that's probably just due to a bunch of different reasons to do with maybe like body function, I guess.
You know, the one that always upsets me is like when you heard at the end of the season, Kerner hurt himself versus GWS, and that was round 4, and they kind of managed him throughout the year. You'll never know the answer, but my brain instantly says, if you're telling me he hurt himself then, what would have happened if we'd played Kemp for like 3 weeks? Put him in cotton wool, Kerner. Would Kerner need surgery? Would it have been that bad? Would it have been okay? Would it have been manageable to get him back to his best round 18? Because he was hurt. You could tell Kerner was playing hurt. Probably after the bye, he looked like he couldn't run anymore. And then Chera just makes me think he hurt himself round 2. If we'd rested him till round 8, would we have had Chera fit and firing round 24, having 30 touches? It's them little things after the season when the club starts saying, yeah, Chera really hurt himself round 2. We maybe should have given him 2 weeks. Charlie hurt his ankle round 4 versus GWS. It's them little things that always scare me. Maybe if we just trusted Kemp, maybe if we just trusted Cooper Lord, maybe if we trusted someone else, how much could we have saved? Because I always say Brisbane, TDK starts. I reckon it might have been a different game if we had a fully fit team. I reckon the way TDK played, we might have been in that game at halftime, and then you never know what would have happened.
Yeah, very true. It's always going to be a topic of discussion.
Yeah, we probably saw that even just coming into that elimination final. Like, there's a lot of what ifs. And, as you just said, Tommy, what if we did rest Kerno? We gave Brody Kemp that opportunity. What if we did bring Chera back and he was actually fit and firing, and we went into that final with a fit group? I don't think we would have been bloody 60-0 in 2 quarters and had to scrap our way back like we did even in that opening round last year, where we only just got over the line. Don't get me wrong, bloody awesome win, but just cracked ourselves over the line. We don't want to be in that position every single game. It's basically a dogfight. It's not like you're digging yourself out of a grave. It's not.
It catches up with you. You can only come back so many times before someone actually kills you, and it catches up with you at times. And I always say that game's brilliant as well. You make a really good point. If you look at Carlton's second half in that final, and you flip it, if you just said, look, Carlton finished that game at half time, let's just say Carlton were 10 points ahead, which I think they won the second half, was it, by about 10 points? That might have been a different game if you had, say, someone on the bench, you bring Pitternet on to try and close up the game, do something like that. Always hard to say what ifs, though, because we'll never know. But it just makes me think if we were fully fit then, we might have had a chance. But 60-0, you're not winning many games if you give 60-point head starts.
Yeah.
Little were we to know that TDK would come on as a game changer in that game. But that's in the past. Focused on 2025. Yeah.
Always good to see in hindsight.
It's the biggest what if, isn't it? If TDK started, and I that's the question I'd love to ask Voss. If you had your time again, would you have started him, knowing he could only maybe play 50% of the game, and then sub Pitternet on at halftime once he's got you a lead? Would you flip it up? Would you maybe try and get the lead early? Because I always say it's easier to defend a lead than chase it. Like when you've got the points in the bag, they can't take them off you. The other team's got to get them. Yeah. I always wonder, would Voss have done that? Put TDK on at the start, said go as hard as you can. Pitternet's there if we need to sub you off. Just get us a lead. I'd love to see how that game would have played out if we were like maybe 10 points ahead at half time and we had a bit of control. could we have done it?
Yeah, 100%. Even if you just, even if you put your trust into a little bit of Lewis Young ruck and you put TDK down forward, because you know what he's capable of down in the forward line. Not sure too much about Mark Pittonet, as we haven't really had the opportunity to see it, and I think he's basically our full-time ruck since TDK does go down and Pittonet swaps in and out nearly every single game, and he's probably another one on that injury front. He has a pretty unlucky run as well. But let's get into our next question, and I know Louis will like this question. How is Billy Wilson tracking? Is there a debut on the cards?
Well, I got to sit next to Billy Wilson's mum and dad. Like, honestly, two of the nicest people at the BNF. Absolute wonderful human beings and massive now Carlton fans. They weren't before, but he's an interesting one, Billy, because I thought with the injury to Nick Newman, it opens half-back flank up, and Billy's a little bit different to Nick Newman and Ollie Hollands. He's an incredible quick player. He's fast. He breaks lines. And he's very, very dangerous with the ball in his hands. He did very well by reports against North Melbourne, but he hasn't really featured he hasn't featured in the practice games, and he's been playing VFL. He's an interesting one to watch, isn't he? Because I think his natural replacement is Sard. I think that's probably something he's looking at. If you judge who's there now, Billy Wilson's probably closer to Sard than he is Nick Newman. He's not a lockdown. He's an aggressive, attacking, transitional defender. So he's definitely one I look at. I am surprised. When Voss said speed and power, I did think with the Nick Newman injury, maybe Billy Wilson's a shout here. Maybe Billy Wilson on the other half-back flank and Carlton decide to be like an exciting Brisbane, Kitty Coleman one side, Dane Zorko kicking through traffic on the other. But seems Voss has gone with a more defensive lineup. I think he'll play. It's really for Billy. He's just got to keep doing what he's doing because he's got the skills. It's just with Billy, he's annoying. If you watch the VFL, 1 week he looks like Adam Sard, and then the next week he looks like Nick Hind. It's like a real peak and trough with him. He just needs to get that consistency and play to his strengths. But he could be a very good player. He's dangerous. Like, I don't think there's many players at the club. Maybe Chincotta, who are as quick as Billy when he's running with the ball. He's very quick.
Yeah. Well, speed would be very, very much an asset to us. Something that we're always criticised for lacking. So, it's either, we might see him this year, but I think it's more likely next year.
Yeah. Hopefully no hamstrings torn with that speed argument as well. All right. What's the biggest story of the 2025 season trade-wise? Oh, straight away mine goes to Chad Warner. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the Chad Warner story is going to be big, isn't it? I mean, the poor boy, he buys an investment property near both training grounds, and the questions will be asked. There's one just before we went on air that evidently Luke Jackson hates Perth and wants to come back to Victoria. So that's just been released. That's just been released today. That evidently he's not settled in Perth and he misses the big bright lights of Victoria. So that'll be it. From a Carlton perspective, I've got a weird feeling, and I hope I'm wrong. I feel like Carlton might go hard at a small forward. I think they're going to put time into Motlop. They're going to put time into Durden. And I think the injuries for Durden might curtail him. And I think that might force Carlton to maybe sniff the market for a small forward. So that's definitely one. I think from a Carlton point of view, I wouldn't be surprised in 2025, Carlton have a sniff at an established small forward to complete the team. I wouldn't be surprised to see that.
Yeah. So those Perth trades would make big news over here in the West with the West Australian. No doubt that Luke Jackson's story will probably be in it tomorrow on the back page. So it's very ruthless reporting over here. So Chad Warner, maybe Luke Jackson might be a big talking point, and also one of our own players, TDK. So if he doesn't re-sign, then it's either we convince him with probably less amount of money than probably other clubs would offer, like St Kilda, but hopefully he chooses some loyalty to stay.
I think he does. I genuinely think Tom de Koning stays. I don't believe the St Kilda offers. I don't think St Kilda have offered 17 million to Finn Callaghan. I don't think they're offering 1.7 for TDK. I think this is media noise. He'll definitely be interested, but I don't think it's as high as people say, and I think Carlton will come to the table.
Yeah.
Yeah, just read an interesting article just on Luke Jackson. Apparently, Jackson's new partner, former Australian netballer Kelsey Brown, hails from Victoria. While she is signed on as an ambassador for Perth-based Super Netball side, West Coast Fever, for 2025, she also has expanding work opportunities on the East Coast. Jackson recently spent the Christmas period with Brown and her family on the Victorian Surf Coast. So, a lot to ponder about. Next question we have got. All right. How long have you had Instagram for? Ooh, probably my account, my Carlton Blues account. I think I've had it since September 2023, I believe. What about you, Pommy?
I genuinely would not have an idea. PommyinOZ was probably started, 2020? I'd say 3 years. If I'm lying, I'm lying. But it's 3 years, I reckon.
Yeah. For me, 10th of October 2023, I remember making the account, put it in the sort of EST in the bio. So that was when I made Carlton Flaggers 2025. Actually, it was 2024 back then. I had to change it. But Perth Blue Baggers pod, it was right after we played Collingwood. I can't remember what date that was, but can try and find it. But yeah, just look in the bio.
Fair enough. And the last question I've got, last question of fan questions. My question from me to you, Pommy, is where does PommyinOZ username originate from?
I'd love to say it was something like interesting and like exciting. Just genuinely, since I've come over here, I've been the Pommy one. So when I first came over here, when I was working in golf, everyone just called me Pommy. And literally, when I started during COVID, I was just like, everyone knows me as Pom. Terry used to start, like, he introduced me as Dan, I think, 3 times. If you actually go back and watch OG Blue Abroad, I was Dan for about 3 episodes before Pom just took over. So I think it's just mainly how people know me. And like, it's so bad now. Where I used to work, we had about 8 English people, but I was the only Pom. They just got their name. So it was like, it became an honorary thing. So yeah, that's it. Just English guy in Australia. Easy. New meta laws, though, make it hard because Pommy is considered a racial slur. So it's quite funny if someone just calls me Pommy and doesn't tag me. They actually cop a 24-hour silencing ban. So make sure you use the full term. That's the only way around it.
Okay.
All right. Thanks for that, Pommy. That's a life-saving moment just there. So the last thing we have to say, so we do this with every special guest, is does PommyinOZ have a question for us?
Yeah. How long, if the Premiership window's open now, without buying and selling anyone, how long do you think the Premiership window stays open for with the other teams that are around us?
Well, the acquisition of Jagger Smith was sort of meant to open the window a little longer. So good. I mean, he needs to recover from his ACL first before it shows any potential. So I'm going to say if it was probably, some would probably consider us to be a bit like Brisbane with maybe like a 5-year window. We're probably 2 years in, maybe 3 more years. And then if Jagger Smith and we get some other pieces around him with that sort of that structure and someone in the back, someone in the midfield, and someone in the forward line for years to come. You could extend it to an extra 3 or 4 years, maybe. So whatever, like 2030.
Yeah.
Like it.
Wow. So from my understanding, I'm going to say, how long does it stay open for? How old's Cripps now? He's 30. We are really, we're not desperately running out of time, but
Yeah.
Oh, sorry for slamming the door. But it needs to happen. I have said it so many times today, but we need to be consistent with what we actually do. I know, Louis, I see that sneaky little grin on how many times I actually said the damn thing today.
Yeah.
But we've got to stay stronger together. And I think that'll be consistency, and stronger together will be the big thing in 2025. But that will wrap up episode 20. Pommy, thank you so much for coming on. Absolute pleasure to have you. And hopefully we see you on again.
Anytime, boys. It was an absolute pleasure, and I wish you all the best of luck with this. Can't wait to see you guys celebrate a flag in 2025.
Thanks, Pom. Have a nice one, mate.
Cheers. Thanks, boys.